Welcome back. So we're now on to Unreal Tournament 2004, released in, surprisingly, 2004. And hopefully this recording looks okay. I've been messing about with various settings and field of view and whatnot. And also, the movement in Devastation is pretty simple. You've got fancy dodging, jumping. The mouse feels a little bit different. So hopefully it's not going to be too nauseating. And I think I'm getting, let's see, 400 frames a second. Yeah, I think that'll do. So this is Onslaught. It's called. It's actually a really good game mode. Kind of more to talk about it. I think we should just go on a kind of tour of this. I kind of go around all of the nodes. We'll talk about that. So, and again, I haven't actually played this in any serious capacity for God knows how long. It's called Snowdrift. This is version 2. There was a version 1, which I think was called Sheer. Onslaught Sheer, which was very similar to this. But I don't have that file, and I don't think it would have been worth looking at even if I did have it, because it was pretty rough around the edges. This may or may not be the... Well, I'll kind of get onto this at some point, but... With Devastation I talked about how I lost quite a few maps, and with Unreal 2004 there's the same problem, except I don't actually know how I lost the maps. Like, I didn't have a hard drive crash or anything, so there's a bunch of maps which are just inexplicably gone, but maybe I'll kind of flesh out my thoughts on that a bit later on. So Snowdrift is a pretty typical map. It's just a big icy square. And well, to summarise this map, it's one of the first maps which I made. And it's a bit of a kitchen sink map, if that makes sense, which is to say there's kind of a bit of everything here, even though it doesn't quite make sense as a place. I mean, one of the things about making maps, you think, should it actually make some sort of sense as a place, or should you just slap everything together? It's a video game, it doesn't matter. And this kind of suffers from that problem, where, okay, so this is some sort of Arctic base or whatever, and I wouldn't say it's not coherent, but there's a bunch of stuff which is here, as I say, just a kind of kitchen sink approach of, well, this map needs to have X, Y, Z, so I'll put it in, and I'll show off, how good I am at making a fancy skybox with that not very impressive skybox, actually. And, it was very sort of putting stuff in just as, the map needs this, and it needs this, and it needs that, and it needs other things as well. So I wouldn't say this is incoherent, but it's a bit, I don't know the word for it, kind of questionable, but why does all these features here? So there's no actual, there's nothing out the edge of the map, you just hit an invisible wall. Or you die, apparently. Didn't know that would happen. So, okay, we'll pop in the Raptor. I can't remember how to change the view from internal to external. I said I haven't played this game in any real capacity for such a long time. I think, yeah, I'll go around all the nodes, which are things which, as you see there, have to basically construct. And this does, I actually think, have bot support. So I could actually load up a bunch of AI enemies, but I think for the purposes of showing it off, it would be a bit, just now, not really very good. So I go around building up these nodes, and see the map in the corner there kind of shows how it's all working. So you need to build up these nodes to link to the other power. It's one of the things that kind of makes sense when you play it. And when I say a kitchen sink map, this tunnel has got these little moving kind of walkway things, well, moving walkways, a moving platform. This is a good example I'm talking about. It's like, oh, I need a map, so I need a mover, and this doesn't really make a lot of sense to exist. But I thought, well, I'll just put it in anyway. And I think this map, it's a very typical, if you had anybody that was vaguely familiar with mapping in this game or any game, and you showed them this map, they'd say, yeah, this was your first proper attempt at a map, wasn't it? And it's quite hard to put into words, I guess, why people would know that, or why I can look at other maps. This was probably the first somebody made. It is just, the terrain's a big square on a kind of featureless plane. It's nice and simple. There's not much decoration on the terrain. And it's hard to put this into words. Maybe I'll do a little drawing or something later on. But the way the terrain is laid out, it's hard to describe. It's like it's got a very set average height. But when you think about terrain, you think about hills and valleys and craters and all that stuff. Whereas I've essentially just taken a flat bit of terrain, just put a few hills and valleys on it. It doesn't feel entirely organic. Yes, it's hard to explain. Maybe I'll do a little drawing or something, just showing what I mean about the way the terrain's laid out. Again, it's very typical of a kind of first map, where you just plonk a bunch of terrain down and start modifying it. I guess it's like, there's not any very high points or very low points. So the terrain itself is pretty flat, never mind this completely kind of featureless plane that I'm on here. And again, this is the kind of me just putting these static meshes together, thinking, okay, you know, we'll have a pipeline out here. It doesn't make a lot of sense. Where's it coming from? Where's it going? And all of these little platforms and a teleporter and all this kind of fancy stuff. And you know, it just doesn't. It's not a terribly, I said, coherent space. But again, very typical of a kind of, okay, this is my first map, which I'd say would actually be playable. I don't think this ever has been played. I think it was technically released at one point on Titan Onslaught forums, which are long since gone, which is a bit of a shame. So it's never really been played. Yeah, this is the sort of thing I'm talking about, where I've found these fancy little static meshes. Oh, you know, I'll put these on the rusty building, it looks kind of cool, but again, this doesn't terribly make a lot of sense as an actual place. I mean, maybe it doesn't have to. I said, you know, there's a lot of maps which are very fun despite not making a ton of sense. But this is very kind of plain. There's not much interest to any of this. It's just a wide open space. No decoration on the terrain either. I mean, it's not particularly hard to do. I just didn't do it for this. But you get like sort of you could put little like rocks and bushes and whatnot onto the terrain itself, so it's not quite just a big featureless lump. And again, when I talk about kind of putting in features, oh yeah, you know, I'll demonstrate that I can make a fancy rotating mesh with this, which doesn't exactly look great, but again, kitchen sink approach. I'll put in a mover and a fancy skybox, and not really a fancy skybox, all these little lighting effects, and probably not going to bother building any more nodes, because I mean, the thing about this map is just this, it's just kind of going round and round and round. Yeah, must be some sort of collision error here. This must be a jump pad, I assume? Yeah, easy enough. And there would be a vehicle spawned here, and this would be a sort of runway, which doesn't really make a lot of sense because vertical takeoff and whatnot. So yeah, the terrain very just kind of plain, you know, valleys, and there's not much decoration here. I think there was something at the top of here. Yeah, there's a few little power pickups there just to kind of show the reward for getting up there. And again, this just kind of light, doesn't really make a ton of sense here. I think that's showing off most of the actual features on this. So yeah, it's just the kind of typical, well, there's a terrain and there's nodes, and you know, each of the nodes has a little building on it, and there's a big base in the middle, and there's these little valleys connecting it, and it doesn't really fit together very well. And I don't even remember putting this ship in. Well, I kind of do, but you know, again, oh, there's a ship mesh, so I'll just put that in over here, even though it doesn't fit as such. There's a fancy corona on that light. Yeah, again, look at that. I don't particularly remember putting this together, really. And the collision on this is a bit questionable as well. It often is the case on big static meshes like this. So yeah, you're just kind of looking at this, and this is what I'm talking about, the seam here between the terrain and just the mesh of the ground plane, that's very sort of, yeah, there's not necessarily a good way of actually covering that up, but I mean, ideally the terrain should be going out, not, it should be the terrain that's going off to the horizon, not this kind of lump of static mesh box plane. So yeah, this is just very typical. Put a lump of terrain down, get it all fitted together, put in random meshes to a vague theme. Because the one thing I've not really checked out yet is the actual base itself in the middle. And I have to say, this is something of an unconventional choice, where normally, you know, it's a kind of, you have, normally in a lot of these maps you have a base at one side, another base at the other side, and the nodes all go through the middle. This is a bit of a more unconventional one, where the bases are essentially back to back with each other. Which isn't, it's kind of debatable if that's a good thing or not, because, you know, the way Onslaught's supposed to feel, it's an epic battle going from your base forward to the enemy's base through the battlefield, whereas this is, well, actually you start off practically next door to each other, but it's not just a bad thing, it's more interesting than just a kind of typical setup, and who knows how it would have actually played. So this is my very sophisticated little room, and again, this is very typical. I wouldn't call it beginner decoration, but kind of, you're just getting familiar with the tools, and you're beginning to get a bit more comfortable with the geometry and the meshes. And this, you know, it's a pretty plain room, but nevertheless, there's you know, trying to make it visually interesting. This teleporter must go. That doesn't make a lot of sense, does it? I mean, the actual, I guess you'd call it objective here, is you link up all the nodes to the enemy's core, which is here, and then you would blow this up, and that's how you win. So it's really interesting game mode. I might load up some bots and show it actually in action. So that takes you down here. Right, okay. There's no vehicle spawns here, that's kind of strange. Yes, this doesn't really make a lot of sense either. The teleporter that comes up here. But I guess that's what I was trying to put together. And this, the map we're looking at next, Foundry, I want you to kind of remember the way this base we're looking at right here looks, because this is kind of the beginning of the my thought process for that map. And again, so it's a box. And there's a kind of something that I read a very long time ago, which it says it's really boring to make a level out of a bunch of boxes stuck together, but there is no other way of making a level other than sticking a bunch of boxes together. In reference to kind of indoor maps, you know, it's a bit more different when you've got outdoor, but, you know, again, as a kind of someone who's dabbled in, well, not just dabbled, actually made all these maps, I kind of see the way other games, the level designers kind of gone, okay, I'm going to try and make this not look like a big obvious box. And for the same reason that, you know, we build things orthogonal and right angles in real life, it's the same in a game. You know, even though you can build something theoretically in the way you want, it's much easier to deal with, you know, nice neat beams, that kind of thing. I wonder how many times these static meshes have been seen in real life. All this stuff came with the game, just if that wasn't so this should be pretty obvious, didn't we? I didn't make anything of my own here other than putting it together. Yes, this is Snowdrift, and I'm going to just stop this recording and actually check if I put bot support in this. Maybe I could show some sort of vague battle happening. And I kind of feel like I've not shown this off very much, but at the same time I've kind of been around the whole map, showing all the little nodes and everything, so I guess there's not much more we can show, so yeah, it's just kind of fairly boring, flat-ish terrain and not much what to do. So this is either the end of it or not, depending on if I get the bot supports done. So with regards to bot support, if you spawn in a bunch of bots and you don't have the pathing in, this is what happens. They'll just kind of run around getting the vehicles but they can't go anywhere. Which is very strange. I could have sworn that I put bot support in this, or maybe I just realised the map was a bit of a dead end and didn't really bother. I'm actually quite... Yeah, because they'll go to the vehicles, but then there's nowhere for them to actually go. From the bot's perspective, they're just stuck. And I could, in theory, set up all the pathing. You have to basically manually... It's not automatic, you have to manually place a bunch of nodes, and it's just a bit of a faff. Which I'm not going to do just to show this. But yeah, this is... oh god. Yeah, the old muscle memory's coming back now. So yeah, I'm not going to show kind of pointless battle on this now, so... I can't say I have many other comments about this map. Again, it's just very classic, basic Onslaught map, which might have been quite fun to play, who knows, but it's all kind of irrelevant now. I don't think this ever was played. Yeah, see here's someone, a bot, made their way out the base. I'm not sure how that's happened. Okay, well, there's nothing more to see here.